especially you, John. I'm glad you came. I have to stay in the middle because there's a camera, but you can actually sit on either side. So hi everybody. My name is Cherif Awad for those of you that don't know me. So today's presentation has to do with resetting your child's brain, and why this is important was introduced by Father Peter, and he was talking about screen addictions. Of course, screen addiction is something which is extremely difficult, and we are constantly fighting something. However, we'd like to know what we're fighting, and most of us are unaware of what we're going through. So today, we're presenting a solution about screen addiction and the technology in our lives and how to better manage it, especially in a family dynamic. So this is based on a book that was written by Victoria L. Donkley. Dr. Donkley is a psychiatrist. She's a licensed practitioner. She has a practice in Los Angeles. And she regularly has intervention with children who have all sorts of illnesses, such as attention deficit disorder, behavioral disorders. And a lot of the people that she sees are sometimes misdiagnosed because they might be taking medication for attention deficit, but in reality, it's just behavior which has been impacted or affected by screen addiction. So today is an information session about her book, and it's a breakdown really of the major components of the book, and it's especially good for the families, and let's go right through it. So a lot of you are sitting down. Hopefully everybody should be asking that question, why should we be concerned? Because often we'll neglect the why part, and should we be concerned, Cherif? Absolutely. We should definitely be concerned. Screen addiction is a huge problematic. Myself, I've witnessed it, of course, because I've had screen addiction. Now it's a lot more tolerable, a lot less of an impact in my life. But we should definitely be concerned because screens create barriers. It creates barriers in our lives. How does it create barriers? Now, if we look at some of the images here, you'll see that, first of all, it creates barriers to health, barriers in attention, barriers to social life. Hold on, there's a technical issue here. Thank you, Peter. So as I was saying, screens create a barrier to our lives in many different ways. So the first image here, we see a barrier to health. Now this is a very, very troublesome situation. We have children that are often using screens while in bed. And if you look at what is happening right now, physiologically, the child is tired. The child wants to sleep. So the body is giving a signal that it needs to rest, but it can't. Why? Because the child is being constantly bombarded by information. The frontal lobe of the brain is constantly being bombarded by information. So there's a disconnect here. There's a barrier. There's something that is pulling the child away from a good quality sleep. Going to the next picture, right next to it, we have principal trying to get a teenager's attention using a megaphone here, but hopefully we don't have to come to that. But here the teenager very easily can be distracted by the screen and can actually intentionally look at the screen not to listen to what that principal is trying to say. Now, obviously it's being exaggerated, but as parents, we often see a situation like that. We're trying to talk to our children, and because our children have a screen in their hands, they're not really looking at us. And to have a child look at you is fundamentally important, because that's the first step for them to actually listen to what you have to say. Oftentimes, they'll be distracted simply because they have a screen in their hands. So you need to put that down and then really get to their level and speak to them in the eyes. So that's why we're talking about barriers in attention. So another problem is barriers to social life. So this is a very interesting thing, because obviously It's nice to give ourselves a date with a friend. It looks like they're having some sort of a coffee date. They're facing each other, yet they're looking at their screens. They're not even having time together. And social interaction is absolutely important. It's crucial for our development as human beings. And a lot of people are misled in terms of their communication skills. Myself being an attorney, we understand and we relate to people 90% non-verbally. And this is something that people are not even aware of. But there is no growth, there is no learning in their social development if they're facing each other yet are completely distracted by their screens at that point. Yeah, I hear you, but I'm not really attentive to you, right? So screens are harmful and they create barriers even in that context. Why? Electronic screen syndrome. This is the disease and we need to do something about it. Why? Because it affects moods. It even affects growth hormone. Growth hormone is very important, especially to children. They have this naturally flowing in their bodies, but it's not really flowing properly right now. It's being dysregulated by the onslaught of screens. It also affects sleep, the quality of our sleep. This is the regenerative state that our bodies need to enter into in order for them to fully grow and mature and develop and even repair itself. We're hindering that right away with electronic screen syndrome. Behavior, meltdowns. Why do they whine? They don't listen the first time around. You got to repeat 5 times, sometimes if you're lucky, or 10 times the same thing within a span of 5 seconds for them to listen. Why? Because of electronic screen syndrome. ESS can negatively impact the long-term development of the child. So even if in the immediate future you say, well, that's fine, he'll have a little crisis and a meltdown, but he'll be okay tomorrow. Tomorrow is not what we're concerned with. A child doesn't stay a child their whole lives. A child grows up eventually to become a teenager. That teenager becomes an adult, and that adult also will be a contributing person in society. How will they contribute? Well, are we really doing our parts as parents if we're letting this kind of situation go on? What are they maturing into? For your information, the brain only matures at the age of 25. So we're introducing gadgets which directly impact the negative development of the brain, and we're doing this at an extremely young age. I see children sometimes in restaurants with little smartphones, and they're completely distracted with this throughout the day. We don't monitor how much time they're spending on it, and they're sometimes 5, sometimes 2, sometimes a little older than that. And it's absolutely devastating on the long-term development of that child. The brain needs to rest, and we're overstressing it with electronic screen syndrome. As I was saying, human beings primarily communicate with 90% non-verbally. So the fact that you're seeing me right now and I'm seeing you, I have full communication. Whereas most of our times we're communicating behind screens, and we're actually limiting our communication skills to only 10%. So this is how the world is right now. Why do I need to meet that person? Just send them a text. That's fine if you're already familiar with the individual, because if I know the person, is very easy for me to complement that communication with technology. So technology is there to add to our communication, but not to replace it, not to remove the nonverbal part of it. So it's very important to have social interaction and to fully communicate with individuals. So for instance, if I'm sending a message to my wife, and of course I have a full-on communication with my wife, and I have a long-standing relationship with her, adding a little bit of information with text messaging, that's fine. But completely removing the human element, the human contact, we are handicapping ourselves. And communication is extremely important. A lot of breakdowns in relationship happen because of that. So we should be concerned. Now, electronic screen syndrome is also very difficult to escape. When you're in it, you're really in it. And we're talking about here a vicious cycle. So you're really stuck in that cycle and you can't get out. Why is it that you can't get out? Well, of course, when kids are using these electronics, it causes some difficulties in their behaviors. Then, of course, difficulties in behaviors make people go into a very, very dysregulated hormone state, like I was saying before. And then afterwards, that creates a hyper stressed flight syndrome. And then after that, what do we do to appease it? We give them more screens. So we never really quite get out of it. So we're just caught in that loop, caught in that loop. Mushir and I will give a very interesting conversation, a very good presentation about the effects of screens. But where it's lacking is that it didn't present a solution. And that's where Dr. Donkley is trying to get people's attention that it's okay to understand that something is there, but at the same time, if you have an addiction, if there's a problem on the body, if you don't offer anybody a solution, how do we get out? So this is what the book is about. It's offering you a solution so that you can actually get out of it. So this is Dr. Donkley. So she has a couple of YouTube videos online, and you can search online for Victoria L. Donkley, and you'll find a couple of her YouTube videos. They're very interesting, and she answers a few of frequently asked questions. So if you don't mind, I'll take 2 minutes and I'll try to stream the YouTube video because she sums up the situation in her words, and I'd like for you to actually meet the person that wrote the book. So let's take a few minutes and watch that. So I'd like to thank Dr. Donkley for giving us a book like that. And there's another video coming up after this one, but this one was really interesting because we talk about some frequently questions, you know, that always come about. Parents are concerned. Why should we be doing this? Should we be really investing in that? And the answer is clearly yes. So what are the benefits, since we touched upon that? Well, there's a slew of them. I'd like to read all of them, but maybe just look at some key ones. So hopefully people can see it. It is written in small font, so I'll try to read them, and maybe some of you will understand better this way. So it resynchronizes the body clock. So the body has a clock. For some of you that didn't know, we do have a body clock. There's a time for us to wake up, time for us to go to bed, and we often find children not being able to wake up on time or going to bed later than usual. So this is something that helps us. We're not talking about hormonal changes throughout the child's life, because of course as they become teenagers, it's normal for a child to wake up a little later and go to bed later. That's fine. But we need to get back to a normal baseline, and one of the key benefits, it really resynchronizes the body clock. That's very important. Normalizes hormones. We talked about growth hormone. We also talked about normal levels of stress and melatonin, which is important for sleep. So this is particularly important because a lot of the kids have a hard time sleeping. We saw the picture of the young child who is trying to sleep. The body is screaming for good quality sleep, yet the child cannot sleep because it's constantly being distracted, pulled away with the screen. So it is fighting the body constantly. So we need to do a brain fast to get to a normal level of melatonin. Redirects the blood flow from primitive to more developed areas of the brain, the frontal lobe namely. Enhances sleep, the restorative sleep, so the one where we have to restore our bodies, we fix our bodies that way. Rebalances brain chemistry, including dopamine. By the way, dopamine is something which is in the body. So it's a normally occurring hormone. However, with the onslaught of screens, we are actually triggering huge amounts of dopamines in our bodies. The famous like buttons that you hit all the time on Facebook or Instagram, or so what you're actually doing is that you're releasing dopamine into the brain. And a lot of people don't really understand this or even realize that. So you're constantly releasing dopamine into the brain, and the brain becomes dysregulated because you're having huge amounts of dopamine in the brain all the time. And children have this as well. So you're not doing this to your brain as an adult, a developed brain as an adult, which is past the 25 years of age, so that's a little bit less likely, but you're also doing it to a child who's 5, 6, 10, 15, and who's still developing. So they're getting huge amounts of dopamine in the brain. And it's not the kind of feel-good hormone that's coming from a situation. Yes, thank you. Yeah, okay, well, I'm going to have to bring it down, however, after that to read, but hopefully it can benefit. So we're not talking about the small amounts of dopamine that the body gets when you're doing some sort of physical activity like playing in a park, going for a bike ride. We're talking about huge levels of dopamines because you're constantly hitting that like button on Facebook and Instagram and all of the social media that we are surrounded by. So I came back, sorry. For some reason, well, that's why I'm saying it. That's why I'm saying it as well. It rebalances the brain chemistry. It reduces electrical excitability on brain cells, relieves overstimulated reward, the addiction, right, of the sensory pathways, as well the symptoms and function benefits, strengthens mood regulation and stress tolerance, improves executive function, establishes baseline for screen time tolerability, increases capacity for eye contact, right? People that are often trying to talk to each other, but they're constantly looking at a screen. So we need to have eye contact, right? Eyes are the windows to the soul. We always say that. So it's important to have eye contact. So anyways, the list goes on, but what's important for us to understand is that it has huge, huge benefits on the body. So this is definitely worthwhile to do. So Cherif, how do we do this? Well, we touched upon that. It's a screen fast So to reset the brain, we need to do fasting, the same way that we do spiritual fasting in church to come closer to God. Well, to come closer to our normal body functions, we need to put those screens down, but in a very, very strict way. So what we're trying to do here, what we're trying to achieve is we're trying to achieve a 4-week program, a 4-week goal. And to do that, we have to essentially control all the screens that are prevalent around us. Which screens? Absolutely every single one, especially the interactive ones. If you'd like. So what we're trying to do here is that we're going to target all the screens. So here I give an example of some of the screens: TVs, video games, consoles, computers, portable devices, smartphones, iPads, those Nintendo DS that kids sometimes will bring with them on social events, social activities. They'll go to a friend's house, they'll go to restaurants. You've seen this sad situation where you have people that are giving themselves dates at restaurants. All the families are there and they have friends, and of course you go with your kids. Kids are all sitting together, and then after the meal is over, even sometimes during the meal, the kids take out their smartphones and they're plugged to their smartphones. They're not even socializing with each other. This is so sad. Sometimes they're cousins that haven't seen each other for maybe a year. And the first thing they do, they sit down, they eat, and then they're completely distracted with their screens. They don't even take the time to have some quality relationship with their cousins that they haven't seen for a year. That is extremely sad. What a missed opportunity. And this happens day in, day out, every single time, and people are completely oblivious to that situation. We need to wake up. So the brain reset happens with a screen fast. So let's remove all the screens. TVs, of course, you're going to say, well, Cherif, I can't remove all of the TVs from the house. No, you can't, but you can turn them off, and you can take the remotes, and you can lock them down. You can do that. And as well, you have TV receivers. You have little streaming devices, Apple TVs, and all sorts of streaming boxes. You can lock those with pins and passwords, by the way. The parental controls is not just something fun to look at. It is actually important. So engineers have taken the time to put these things inside. Why? Because it's important to be able to control some content. And as well, because some famous lawyers probably got in there and said, maybe this is a liability. Let's try to put something in there so that we don't get sued afterwards. So yeah, it's there for a reason, people. So let's be parents and let's control the kind of devices that our kids are using. So we're going to be using that as well. So to be successful, so these are the successful points that we need to be looking at. Both parents must be committed, especially dad. Why? Why do I say especially dad? Why? Thank you, John, for that question. Because it's all your fault. No. Why? Because males are more inclined to be subject to this kind of syndrome, the electronic screen syndrome. Boys and their toys, as we say. So we often dabble into iPads and smartphones and video games more than women. Women have a tendency to socialize a little bit better than men, and we see this from a very young age. So you'll have a lot of boys, and they'll just automatically be more inclined to this kind of technology, this kind of entertainment, and that's problematic. So in a relationship, of course, father and mother have to be on board, and especially dads. That's why Dr. Donkley talks about this. Dads have to be on board. You have to be committed, and you have to be really committed until the end, until the program is successful. So it's a 4-week plan. So of course the calendar has to be filled with lots of activities, but there's also other things that you should do to set yourself up for success. Pick the summer. Why? Well, school's out, no more homework, and daddy, I need the computer, daddy, I need the iPad. No, you don't, because now there's no homework. You have time. It's beautiful outside. You can go for a bike ride. You can go to the park, go to a friend's house, not downstairs in the basement playing video games, mind you. Play outside, socialize, and that's the important thing to do. So summer is a very good period for you to do that because we don't have the obligation of sometimes having to use an electronic device. Put them down. Tell the kids it's a very good time for us to do that. So when school is out, you're on, like Father Peter said earlier. So summer is also, choosing the Lent period is also very interesting Because if we pick the Lent period as being a very good period, we can do it for spiritual reasons as well. So this is a way for us to come closer to God. Because if we're not stuck on our screens, well, we could be reading our Bibles. And by the way, they still have Bibles that are printed. I know you have Holy Bibles on your iPads, but thank God Bibles are still printed so we can actually use them that way, right? It's always good to read. All family members must be on board. It's a family commitment, which is beneficial to everyone. I stress this point. If you think that mom and dad is doing this for their kids, think again. You are also doing it primarily for yourselves as individuals. I don't have any social media, and I know that in the beginning when people started knowing me, it's like, how come you're not on Facebook? I'm not on Facebook. I don't want to be on Facebook. I don't even have the YouTube app on my phone. I don't care for it. Anything that's going to take me away from family time, anything that is something that I don't trust myself using because it just becomes a time sink. You just get in there and you don't know when you're going to get out. That's a problem. So get it off from your phones. But this is a realization that I made through the course of this, thinking I'm doing this for my family and my kids and all that, but as well, I am benefiting as an adult. This is extremely, extremely good. And as well, it brings the family together. So we're doing this for each other at home. I'm going to leave the questions to the end. There's going to be a question period for that. So this is just an example of how we can fill the month, right? So the first week or the week before starting, we should be preparing. How do we prepare? Of course, we're going to tell the spouse. So mommies are going to tell daddies, right? They're going to break the news to daddy. And then, of course, they're going to feel all negative and they're not going to be on board. But it's very important, daddies, that you hear mommies and what they have to say. So tell the spouse. Get on board. That's the first step, right? Be united. Afterwards, what do you do? You tell other people, all the other caregivers. For instance, who takes care of the kids in your absence? Most of the time, for those of us who have the fortunate presence of our grandparents, great. So the grandparents take care of the kids. Tell the grandparents. Why? Because it's easy for us to drop off the kids over to grandparents, and then of course, Giddo and Teta, sorry, the grandparents, what are they going to say? Well, put the Apple TV on, you know, I don't want to mess around and play with the kids. No, you can't do that. You got to do something else. Make bread. You can cook. Clean up. You go to the park, right? So there's lots of stuff. As well, you have also to tell other people. So people that are neighbors, this is very true because I talked about that. You'll send your kids off to the neighbor's house, but what are they doing there? If you tell your neighbors, hey, listen, my kid's on this screen fast, please don't give him any screens, you'll be surprised how respectful and how receptive they'll be. They'll say, okay, no screens for David or Emma? No problem. They'll play outside. Great. Thank you so much. And maybe you would have opened their eyes onto something. Why are you doing this? Oh, by the way, there's a great book written by Victoria L. Donkley about how to reset your child's brains. Oh, wow. So this is very important to talk about it as well. So even the neighbors, any chance that your child can be exposed to screens, talk to people that are going to be welcoming your kids, even temporarily, from an hour or two, and let them know, please, don't subject my children to screens. As well, the other days are reserved to preparing. So planning out your activities. What are you going to be doing? Let's go fishing. Let's go to the park. Let's, you know, so how do we go about doing that? Well, let's plan out the things that we need to do, and as well, go out and buy all the supplies that we need. Games. If we're going to go camping, let's get the sleeping bags. Let's get all sorts of things that we need, right? And then, of course, lastly, but most importantly, we're going to have to sit down and talk to the child. So you have to prepare your child. And then you're going to have to tell them, expose to them why we're doing this. And please don't make them feel alone. Don't make them feel like, here, I'm giving you medicine, sit down. This is not that. You're never going to be successful if you're doing that. What you're trying to do is you're trying to lead. You're saying, we're doing this for the benefit of the family. So let's do it together. We're doing it for you and for us. And we're going to do it together. So really be committed together as a family. And even if there's one sibling that has a problem, if there's, let's say, 2 or 3 kids, well, you'd be surprised sometimes the other siblings also want to jump in and say, yeah, I'll help you. No problem. Let's do this as a family together. So it really brings us together as parents. Now, once this is done, for example, you have here a whole bunch of activities that I put here in the month. Game night, football with dad, day at the pool, dinner with mom, day at the zoo, day at the amusement park, all sorts of things, spiritual retreats. That could be also very interesting. You could take 2-3 days and go to a monastery, something I'm sure Father Peter would approve of that. And then you're going to say, wait a second, Cherif, at the very end you're saying movie night and popcorn. Hold on, you said no screens. Aren't you contradicting yourself? No, I'm not. So you're going to put that at the very end. Why? Because you want to give them a reward. This is not a punishment. This is something to look forward to. This is a stop, reset, refocus, and change our behavior. This is not a, that's it, I'm putting you in the dungeon, you're being locked up, I'm removing everything from your life. No, it is a stop, reset. We're just resetting ourselves, we're recalibrating our compasses. That's what we're doing with this program. So the movie is going to be a reward at the end saying, hey, we've done a great job together doing the screen fast. How about if we watch a movie together, as a family? Popcorn, sitting down, having a fun time. Great. The child's going to have something to look forward to. So that's extremely beneficial for the children, and as well, it's going to give them something to look forward to. So that's fantastic. John, maybe the next slide. Thank you. Okay, so what to expect during the reset? What's going to happen? Of course, the first week, you're going to have some difficulties, right? So the child might be not as receptive. Maybe in the beginning say, okay, I understand, and then afterwards they'll change their mind. Of course, they're going to be a little bit stressed out of, removing all of the screens. I don't know what to do, right? I don't know what to do. So you'll have to be very, very calm, forgiving, yet strong. An iron hand in a, you finish it? What do we say? An iron hand in a velvet glove. So be very steadfast. Be very strong in your approach, but soft and forgiving, because it's normal that they're going through withdrawal at this point. It's very difficult. Make sure you prepare a full month, because you don't want to have the I am bored and I don't know what to do, mommy, and the breakdowns in the kitchens and all. You don't want that. So really be prepared. That's why we spend time preparing before we start getting into the brain reset. Finally, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Is this going to happen for 4 weeks, Cherif? Are we going to be going through this kind of situation where we have meltdowns every day? No. This happens in the beginning. First week especially. By the end of the second week, things start to really taper off, and they take a beautiful dynamic, and it really brings the families together. Next slide, please. So this is the second video that I was talking about, and there are just very quick 3 takeaway points from the book. The book is a very easy read, by the way, but this is just a small summary. So we're just going to click on the link. Thank you. Okay, so why do this? We talked about the biological benefits on the body. We talked about the immediate effects on mood, behavior, attention, social skills, long-term development on the brain. Remember, the brain matures at 25. So we're doing this definitely for the sake of our children and their future and their success in their careers. But on a spiritual level, why do this? Well, very simple. We talked about screens capturing all of our attentions. What is Jesus trying to do? Jesus is at the door and he's knocking, not once in a while, every single second of every single day. He is waiting for an opportunity for you to actually open up the door. But we're too busy. We're too busy watching a movie. We're too busy playing Nintendo games. We're too busy on our smartphones. We're too busy replying to silly things on Twitter and Facebook and social medias throughout the whole country. So if God is knocking at the door, are we truly listening? And the answer is most of the time we're not. How can we be at peace when we're focused on our screens? The answer is you can't. You can't. You have to put it down. To find that peace that God gave us, you have to put down the screens and really truly reconnect with yourselves and with the Lord. And this is why we put this one as the last screen. So this is why we say that screens distract while God attracts. God is trying to attract us to His holiness, to His peace, to His love, to His salvation. He is trying to give us eternal life, and He is the promise of that. But we are promising ourselves other earthly rewards, other temporary rewards. God wants to dwell in our hearts. He doesn't want to dwell in our tablets or iPads. Okay? So that's why it's important for us to put the screens down and do this on a spiritual level. Now, the book is actually not that expensive. It costs about $20. You can order it on Google Play, Amazon, Indigo, and as well, you can even pick it up for free at your local libraries. Some libraries actually have it. So it is definitely beneficial. So this is the book, Reset Your Child's Brain, by Victoria L. Dunkley. It's end meltdowns, raise grades, boost social skills by reversing the effects of electronic screen syndrome. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and if you have any questions, now is the time to raise them. Thank you. I have a few questions. Yes, Joy.
Thank you, Cherif. It was
Thank
very
you.
nice. Okay,
Thank you for your attention.
Thanks. Okay, so it's just to ask, once you're done the program, the 4 weeks, and you reset the brain, what can we do after? They're not allowed to touch at all the tablets, or?
So you're right. That's a very valid question. Like I was saying before, this is a stop.
Sorry, and the movies as well, like going to the movies. Like a movie is 2 hours because it says at the end 15 minutes.
Yes. So Joy is referring to a slide, and we can go back and take a look at it. So at the end of this one, you see here at the bottom, it says, so after your fast, what do you do? How do you bring back the screens into our life? Sharif, you said it's a stop reset. Yeah, okay, but do we just go back to watching movies? No. The idea is for us to reset our brains, but then go back gradually and slowly. So Dr. Dunkley refers to a 15 minutes a day allowance. Now, this is throughout her practice with kids, but it doesn't always apply to every child. It's different. And as parents, we understand our kids quite well, very, very intimately. The way God the Father knows all of His children, well, you as parents also know your own children. So some children are actually more subject to screens than others. Some of them will absolutely go into meltdowns and behavioral issues even after watching half hour of screens. Others can have a higher tolerance. So you as parents get to monitor that, and you know your kids. You know your kids very well. So you know exactly where things start to go wrong. So she's saying 15 minutes a day, which is good. It's a very good way of starting back to introduce the screens. You can start that and see how it goes. You can do that for a week and then see how it goes. The key difference is movies and interactive screens are not the same. We're not talking about the same impact on the brain. Interactive screens are extremely harmful. TV is a passive screen. Passive meaning you sit down and you watch a movie. So you're not interacting with the movie. You are absorbing the content. That is not as harmful on the brain. And that's why we put it actually in the example month. You saw that at the end as being something that you can actually reward yourself with. Now, there is a prevalent 2 hour a day recommended to pediatricians and doctors saying you can go up to 2 hours a day. That is an up to. But that is something which is very standard. It doesn't apply to everybody. So 15 minutes a day, go slow and go a little bit at a time and monitor the behavior of the kids. You can go a little bit too hard, too much, and then the child is going to revert. And the problem with this is that you're going to have to restart the whole fast again. So you don't want to do that. So you really want to go slow and respect it because you can do it again. Us as a family, we had to do it again. But it can be done. And it's a lot easier the second time around. So I hope that answers the question. Any other questions? Mireille?
Does it apply to teenagers?
Sorry?
Does it apply to teenagers?
So, like I was saying, brains mature at 25. So yes, it applies to teenagers. Absolutely. And like I said, is it beneficial for adults? It is absolutely beneficial for adults. But it's critical for young developing brains. Critical. That's why we have a lot of the people talking about marijuana being adopted at 18. I mean, that's been sanctioned by the federal government. That is horrible. The Order of Psychologists came out. The doctors came out saying this is way too early. We're compromising the development of the brain. So this is a very, very well-known situation. So yes, teenagers absolutely benefit from it. The way that you're going to have to introduce it in teenagers' lives, however, is not the same as a child who's 5 years old. So of course, teenagers have their circle of friends and all that, so it's going to take a different approach. But the book does talk about that. So it breaks it down, and it tells you, so in this kind of situation, you can do this. And so you can actually adjust and modulate the approach to teenagers, but it does apply, absolutely. More questions? I know Isabel had a question. Yes?
Well, what if you use like computers at work and stuff like that? So what is the what are we supposed to do in that case? Or like what are the steps to take?
If you're using computers at work, what kind of situation are we talking about here? Are you like a computer engineer and you're constantly on the computer?
Yeah, let's say.
So that definitely becomes problematic, obviously, because you're going to have to interact with that computer all the time. So yeah, that would be extremely. I don't know what the answer is to that situation, but I mean, maybe there was something that was written in the book about that I didn't tackle. But you could no. The brain reset really it's abstinence from screens. Yeah, so that is definitely problematic, and there are a lot of teenagers, for example, that are working at Apple stores and whatever, and are constantly being bombarded with that. That is extremely problematic. Absolutely. Any other questions? I know Isabel had a question. Do you have a question? No? Okay, well, thank you so much for your attention and your time, and I hope it was beneficial. And if there's any other questions later on, you can come and see me. I know that I have until about 1 o'clock, and then after that, I have to go and give the presentation to the servants meeting.